Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Align, where we help you align with your true self, others, and your desired outcome to live your best life. So I think a lot of people, especially if you've been on social media, not living under a rock, you're seeing more of the terms like divine feminine and divine masculine. And those are who are very conscious or spiritual into this world or quite familiar with these terms. But I'm getting asked a lot more and more, especially people in the business world, like, what does this mean? Why we should care? So Robert and I are going to demystify a lot of these kind of terms for you, and more importantly, explain how this applies to your life, why it's important, why you should care. So I think to start off, Robert, would love for you to kind of walk people through why it matters, what it is, and why it matters.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me here, Jessica. My second time. Very exciting. So, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, and again, everything that I'm going to talk about today is just, it's my perspective. So hopefully it resonates with people. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. I think that it's important because I live in New York City as you do, and I'm starting to see some debate and some confusion around what it means to be feminine and what it means to be masculine, right? Now, if you told me this 15 years ago, there was going to be this confusion around what it means to be a man and a woman, I'd be like, what are you talking about, right? But it's what we've become because society is evolving, right? And it is an evolution. But I think when things evolve very quickly, people can get confused. So to answer your question, why is it important? Well, I see a lot of people that I coach that want a certain thing in life. They desire something, but they can't quite reach it. And they seem to be stuck in a pattern around romantic relationships, right? So I think this is one of the things that's important when you do desire a real relationship with the type of person, whether it's man or woman or it doesn't matter, and the energy that you desire, because we're all looking for a harmony or a balance with who we are. If we ourselves are out of balance, it's going to be very hard to find our counterpart.
100%. And I think the love piece, which is, as we talked about on our last episode, is such a hot topic where people have always cared about their love lives, right? But I would say after COVID, when people have really woken up to wanting something real and, whether they're getting out of a long-term relationship that wasn't a fit, or they've been always single and focused on their career and now they're finally ready. I think and I echo that point, people that I coach, they can't get where they want to be because they're not operating at the highest version of a masculine and the highest version of the feminine. I couldn't agree more. And I would also apply, it extends not just to the love life, but also in your work life, right? And Robert and I will walk you through what is like a healthy archetype of both masculine and feminine. When you are operating the highest version of each, that's when your career truly skyrockets. So skyrockets. That's when you're really being able to be a person of service. And obviously, everyone knows this, when you give more value and you serve more people, you're obviously going to be more successful. It is not rocket science, right? So I think what would be really helpful, Robert, for you to walk through what would be a archetype of a healthy masculine, and then what would be an archetype of a healthy feminine?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if it's necessarily binary, but from my perspective, like when we use the word divine, I think we should maybe bring some clarity to that, right? To me, divine is just another word of saying conscious. So to your point, it's an elevated man or an elevated woman. We have higher perspectives. We are more emotionally intelligent. We have elevated ways of living, and we're in congruence with how we were designed, right? Our natural design. And it's so easy to get off course because of our environment. For example, New York City is a very masculine environment. So for a woman to operate in her feminine here is difficult.
Yeah.
You might look at a place as Hawaii as a place that's more free flowing and feminine, right? So, what would a healthy masculine or feminine looks like? I believe that we are balanced, right? We have both of these energies in us because we're human.
Mm-hmm.
And when we balance these correctly, we are integrated, right? We're just an integrated human.
Mm-hmm.
So masculine energy to me is more assertive. It's more direct. It's more courageous. It has accountability. Like in my men's group, it's all about accountability. Like you said you were going to do this last week, you didn't do it. What's going on? Right? It's very direct. It's right at you. It's linear, right? Um, and I think a healthy masculine operates with very high integrity, right? They're honorable men.
Mhm.
Now, what is feminine energy? I mean, that's generally graceful, gentle, nurturing, empathetic, compassionate, I would say, is an embodiment of a feminine, sensitive, supportive, right? So I believe that we're born with primary energies based off of our genetic disposition. Some
Mhm.
people might disagree with that. That's what I believe, right? So, and my percentage, I don't know what people think, 70-30, I think is healthy, right? Because I hear women say, I want a vulnerable man. And it's like, well, how vulnerable do you want him?
Yeah.
You want him to come home and cry every day when he has a problem? No. So you want a vulnerable man up to a certain point. If he's 70% vulnerable, he's either going to attract the masculine woman, or the woman that was once feminine is going to become masculine, because we need balance. We need harmony, right? So those secondary emotions can be feminine, right? To a man. The ones I just described as primarily feminine also exist in the man, and he should embody sensitivity. He should be a nurturing father. He should be supportive. He should be empathetic and vulnerable. But it probably won't work that well if it's his primary energy. It
Mhm.
won't help in business. It won't help in relationships most of the time. Sometimes it works. My parents were flipped and it worked.
Yeah.
But I think that is the minority.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I want to clarify for everyone, we're not talking about gender. That's completely different. It's more of the energies of showing up as masculine, which is kind of the traits that Robert just mentioned, and also talking about the traits that are more feminine. But as we're not talking about gender, it's more of an energy that you embody and kind of a spirit that you use day in day out to live your life. I think would be helpful, Robert. You and I can kind of share an example of when we were out of alignment and we were out of our healthy versions of each. I'll start. So I think earlier in my finance career, very similar, as you said, living in New York and working in a very male dominated industry, I felt like I had to be more masculine to make it. So I was extra assertive, extra like over the top, and I could see how at certain points it came off bossy and it came off too much, right? Because that's not natural to me. The other thing I noticed that it wasn't natural to me was that it didn't feel good. Like I didn't like some of the tone that I use. I didn't like being so like blunt and super super direct. I'm naturally I would say more of the nurturing side. I am direct, but I'm very mindful of my tone. So when I was out of the healthy balance of masculine and feminine, it didn't feel good. I felt icky. I was exhausted when I came home, and I just didn't feel like I felt like I was like not operating the highest version of me. And over time, when I realized, like, oh my God, my power is in my feminine, especially the fact that I work in a male dominated industry. I like the fact that not everyone's always listening. I'm the one listening. I'm actually the one aggregating everyone's opinion, then sharing a sentiment, right? I'm the one trying to find ways for us to collaborate with investors. I'm always the one trying to find a middle ground. That's my natural instinct. So when I slowly but surely kind of embodied more to my feminine side, I was not like I could work longer hours. Enjoyed what I was doing. I was never so much exhausted the way I was before. But that's an example in a work setting where when I force myself to be more masculine. And another thing is like I'm never competitive. Great. I've never been competitive with other people. I've always been very competitive with myself and what I expected. But when people were very competitive with me and I let it get into my head, a very masculine way of thinking, it made me feel icky. It made me not enjoy what I was doing. But when I get on the feminine side embodied, like I never saw the scoreboard when I started seeing the scoreboard just between myself, just like me and myself yesterday, I felt more my defined feminine. So that's an example I would say in the work setting where hopefully that resonates with people of how you can feel like you're out of your natural balance of divine masculine and feminine. But Robert, do you have an example you want to share? Either work, life, love?
Yeah, I'm developing land upstate, and early on, there was insecurity because I'm not a rural guy, I'm not a country guy, I'm a city guy. And
Yeah.
now I'm working with contractors, and this is brand new to me, developing on raw land. And I would approach these men in a way that wasn't masculine, because even though I'm like that in business and in relationships, I was out of my element, or at least I felt like I was. And I got heavily taken advantage of as a result.
Hmm.
So, and I lost a lot of money because I was just trusting, and I was afraid to ask the questions, and I was afraid to hold accountability because I was out of my element. When in reality, it didn't matter that I didn't have experience. I still could have embodied that energy and brought that to the project,
Yeah.
right? And I lost a lot of money, and it became a very costly lesson for me to learn. But people, and this is another point, it's kind of human nature in a sense, where people see a vulnerability, not the healthy vulnerability that we were talking about earlier. When people see a chink in your armor, it's kind of human nature for people to take advantage of it, right? So what we're talking about here with the divine masculine and the divine feminine is it's self-mastery
Yeah.
of all these different emotions that a human being embodies.
Mhm.
And that self-mastery, it does help us get to whatever it is that we want in life. And it also helps us attract whoever we may want in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, what about, I would, since we're talking about the love side, do you have a story you want to share on the love side when you felt like you weren't operating at the healthy balance, where therefore you weren't attracting like your
Yeah,
healthy version of a partner?
I think healing is an interesting aspect of life, right? Because when we're healing as men or women, we are sort of in our feminine. Like I went through some heavy healing, and I was crying a lot. Like I didn't cry for decades. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, there was this really kind of went into like a depressive state. I went into this incredibly emotional, unpredictable state.
Yeah.
And when I was in relationships during that time, it was hard to trust me. I felt like it was hard for women to trust me. They're like, "Are you okay? Do you know where we're going in this relationship? It seems like you're dealing with a lot of stuff, and there's no harm in it." I'm really glad that I healed myself. But as a result, on the other side of that healing is now this confidence, this assertiveness, this accountability, right? That wasn't quite unlocked when I was going through this real emotional state, and that would cause women to lose trust and lose faith in the direction of the relationship.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a big believer, and I always say it's at your darkest time or pain that it turns into power. If you do
Hmm.
the work and the healing, right? Because the pain is when it shows you certain things are not working in your life. So when it all breaks down because it's not working, you find a way to build anew and you build stronger. So I would say in the flip side of your story, I would say early 20s when I was starting to like dating New York City, I applied a very masculine way of dating. Like I literally I took my masculine version at work, threw it into to my love life, and I like was the one directing it, like setting the pace of the relationship, moving things forward, like taking care of things financially, like just doing the most. And so naturally, because I was operating my masculine, I was attracting very feminine men who had no sense of direction, more free flowing, kind of more the feminine way of doing things. And it again, like I knew it wasn't right because I was so exhausted. I would come
Mm.
back from work already exhausted, going into a relationship at home even more exhausted. And it wasn't until, to your point, like the inner healing, where I just realized like I am a feminine person and it's okay that I don't need to do everything. Like that's not my job, right? Like I should be protected. I should be the one kind of more of a free flowing and trusting. I think the biggest thing was I felt like if I didn't move things along, things wouldn't move. So it was more a trust that when I embody my divine feminine, which is like stepping back, letting the divine masculine men lead, right? Feeling safe and then following their lead. That's when I started attracting more healthy relationships. So I would say kind of the opposite of you. But we learn from pain, right? That's a benefit of it.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Um, why are we out of balance? So we kind of mentioned, we are waking up as a collective conscious. People are aware things are not working, but why do you think we're out of balance?
I think there's multiple reasons why we're out of balance,
Yeah.
but we are moving towards equality. We're not perfect. We never will be, right? But a lot of people that scream about inequality, what I remind them that we're more equal than we ever were in almost every single way, right? So men and women, again, we're not perfect, but we're getting real close to equality, right? And that's beautiful. But I think what comes with that is now that we have this equality, we can all operate in the same exact way, right? We're competing for the same jobs. We're competing for the same promotions. So this kind of like, okay, now I could step into this role of CEO. I could step into this role of partner at a law firm, right? And that requires to get to the top, it requires a certain level of disagreeableness. It's a level of competition,
Yeah.
right? Negotiations, and so I think when we look at career, just as the first example, um, stepping into our masculine is oftentimes very necessary, right? As a man and a woman,
Yeah.
to use that energy so that we can propel our careers. But are we able to have the mastery and the awareness to turn it off when we leave our jobs?
Mhm.
And I would, from my experience, a lot of people don't have that. So they get caught in this momentum of in the masculine energy. So now they get into relationships and they start dating like you do or you did in the past.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to turn it off and they don't understand what the problem is. Why am I not getting the man that I want? There's no masculine men out there is the
Yeah.
common theme. And it's like, no, there are. They're not orbiting around you
Correct.
because your energy is not magnetic to the masculine man. We don't want competition. We want complement. We want harmony. So knowing how to turn that on and turn that off is the self mastery that requires a tremendous amount of awareness. I think that's maybe one reason. I don't know if you have any other idea.
Yeah, I would say out about, I think it's huge, right? Like the work, because we're more and more equal over time in the work setting. And you have to, and I want to be clear, like there's nothing bad about having, like being a female and having masculine traits, right? Like to your point, you need it. A healthy version of masculine is someone who leads, who has high integrity, right? Like even there's element of competition, there's healthy competition. There's nothing bad about having traits that's masculine. You need it for survival and you need it to, like, to your point, in a work setting, you always have to have those traits. It's just overdoing it in any setting. And secondly, to your point, you can't turn it off. I think that is absolutely a huge one. I think another reason why we're out of balance, I think it's also the other flip side is, oh, we can do anything. Like we need to be super equal to men. And I think people take that a little bit too far. To the point about like, let's stick on the topic about like women trying to be more equal. I feel like we overdo and overtake on roles and traits that we don't need to. Like we don't need to embody a full man to be a CEO. In fact, we're a better CEO because we're more balanced, right? We hear the collective. We don't just power through how we want things done. We actually survey, we ask, we care, we're more nurturing. So I think a little bit of out of balance is like thinking feminine is secondary to masculine in a work setting. I think that's a huge thing that, I mean, I was definitely guilty of it. I think a lot of high achieving women also are guilty. We're like, oh, feminine's like not as powerful as masculine, so I want to be more masculine. I think that's also that. It's more of owning and believing the power and being feminine versus trying to be more masculine. I think that's a huge reason why we're also out of balance. But you mentioned polarity and the point about not being able to attract what you want, right? I think it's so funny because a common thing that I hear from a lot of my clients is alpha women wanting to attract an alpha man, and it doesn't work, right? Because there's no polarity. Do you want to dive a little bit deeper from a man's perspective? You want to dive a little bit deeper on that?
Yeah, for sure. So the law of polarity is a universal law, which basically means the more opposite the poles, the more magnetic they are.
Yes.
So this is a fundamental truth,
Mhm.
right? Just like the law of attraction. So, when our energies are kind of meddled together, there's confusion,
Yeah.
right? So really, I hear a lot of women or men say, "Oh, I'll drop into my feminine when I meet a masculine man, or I'll be more masculine when I meet a feminine woman." It's like this chicken and egg.
Yeah.
No, the practice is if you're by yourself or you're in a relationship, that's your work.
Yeah.
Joe, that's not, no one's going to do that for you because you're not
Yep.
going to attract that man or woman unless you are embodying that energy first. So the polarity is real. We have to recognize that there is no way. I would just say there's no way. It rarely works where a very masculine man is going to be attracted to a very masculine woman. And even if they are, the chances of the relationship working out, like this whole power couple thing, people would always point to like Tom Brady and Giselle or whatever. I mean, if you actually peel back the onion of the Beckhams and the whatever her name is, Victoria,
Yep.
you see the energies that are different. They're definitely different. Giselle was a very masculine energy, and Tom Brady was not at home on the football field. Different story,
Right.
right? But there has to be a harmony. This is how nature works. So really, to your point, what you said earlier is really important, Jessica. It's like I didn't feel good on
Yeah.
dates. That's what I tell women that I work with or men. I'm like, so you're embodying all this masculine energy. You're proud of it. You call yourself a boss bitch. That's great. But how do you feel when you lay your head at night? How do you feel about your personal life? And oftentimes it's only a matter of time where that energy expires because it's inauthentic. It's not usually, sometimes it is in a small percentage of people, not the natural inner harmony that we have in ourselves, the primary core energies
Yeah.
with those secondary energies. So it's really about how we feel.
Yeah. You hit a point about feeling and kind of being being off balance, and that's kind of like the GPS to it. I feel that in off to your point about in a relation like attracting the polarity, the two sides of it, it's okay. It's like you first have to really figure out what is your split, right? Like say, like for me, is it 70% feminine, 30% what is my split? Therefore I know what's my good match, right? I think that's really important. You don't need to be fully in your feminine to find a person who's fully in your masculine. You probably wouldn't want that, right? Like think about it. Like if you are a man and you're super alpha, right? Are you really okay if your woman never has an opinion about anything and always is down for whatever? You probably don't respect her because she doesn't really have a mind of her own, right? So I think it's we're not saying be so polar and so like 100% alpha a male, 100% like submissive or super feminine woman. It's like knowing your balance, therefore attracting it, right? I think a lot of women who are alpha women, what I would say is, are you genuinely that alpha? Say you are 70% in your masculine as a woman, 30% in your feminine, right? If that's genuinely you, do you really want an alpha male or is it for your ego? Because society
Mhm.
has told you alpha man is the highest virtue. You have to be honest, right? Like if you have a lot of masculine energy, you're probably going to be more happy and successful with a long-term relationship with a man's more in his feminine. And the thing is, a lot of men out there are very in their feminine, not in a bad way, right? Like they're just
Yeah.
more the nurturing one. There's so many guys who be so happy being the stay-at-home dad. Like there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's just owning who you are versus trying to be a version of yourself because society tells you, your parents tell you, or whatever tell you. One thing I'm trickling back on why we're out of balance, because you made a really good point. I'll never forget growing up, my mom would say to me, Jess, never depend on a man. But like
Mhm.
always have your own thing, never depend on your man, always have something going for yourself. It's like drilled in me. I know, very weird being an Asian woman, like, oh, never met a man, right? I think it's because, and I don't like my mom meant this in the best way possible. I think it's a lot of women collectively have lost trust and felt safe with men because they've been operating outside of their divine masculine. They're not always protecting. We don't always feel safe. And therefore, we're forced to step into our masculine, right? It's a little bit of a chicken and egg, what you mentioned as well. But I think that's another thing where, as men and women collectively, really figure out what their balance is, I think we're going to see more women drop into their feminine because I don't have to do it all anymore. Like, I don't feel like I could finally rest easy knowing like, okay, someone's got it. I don't have to do anything. That's the
Mhm.
female perspective, Robert, you want to share a male person? Because I'm sure you'll see things that like women are doing that are making it hard for men to step up to be more masculine.
Yeah, it is. And you're 100% right, but what we have to be careful of is, I tell this to my clients all the time. It's like we're all dealt a different hand in life,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we have to persevere in spite of it. So I know a lot of women have been hurt by men. I know it. And it sucks. And it's something that we have to correct as a society, right? Um, but we can't carry it. We have to learn how to heal it because the minute we start generalizing and we start throwing around the word toxic masculinity, it's game over. Like you really got to appreciate men. Like I've always loved women, always in my life. I didn't have a great experience growing up with women in my house, but I just loved women. And as a result, it was reciprocated, you know,
Mhm.
because what you love is going to love you back, most likely,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So with women, like I get it. Like there's been a guy that maybe cheated on you, maybe dad wasn't around, maybe there was sexual abuse. Like it's rampant. It is. But the minute we start generalizing and labeling, we take ourselves out of the game. We really have to love all men and all women if we want to love one man or one woman,
Yeah.
right? So to go back to your question though about masculinity, yes, the difference between I think masculinity and femininity, and some people might disagree with this. Masculinity has to be earned. A
Mm.
man has to go out and earn it. Like,
Yeah.
even in indigenous cultures, there's always an indoctrination. You don't just grow up and become a man when so we got to go earn it. And that might be through success, that might be through whatever, right? Learning how to be a man. It's a birthright to be born a man.
Yeah.
But masculinity is not a birthright. It's earned. Whereas femininity, you could argue it is, right?
It's being.
We see it's just being and it's flowing,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
But a man with the protection, we got to learn how to protect. We have to learn to be dangerous when things go down. We have to learn how to provide. We have to build our empire so that we can welcome a woman into that. Some women will grow with us, and that's great too. But either way, there's a certain expectation that a man needs to build.
Yeah.
He needs to build himself. He needs to build his business. He needs to build his family and provide and protect, right?
Mhm.
So men need to have to really go out there and be courageous to go penetrate the world. It's not always easy. I understand it's not easy to be a woman. I understand it, right? But I think there's less empathy for men. It's
I
like
agree.
get up and get on with it. But there's actually a lot of burden that we carry on our shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why I really want to hit home. I don't think it's healthy to be 100% masculine. Like it's not, right? We need the soft side. You need a process. You need to give your man space to cry, heal. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how he can be a better version of himself. But I think, yeah, that you make a really good point. It's what energy you put out. Like if you're showing up with love, you're going to attract that. And you can't be like, all men are horrible or all women are horrible. Like I always think back of after every heartbreak, like in the love department, after every heartbreak, the times I close, I literally don't attract anyone that's good and healthy, right? The moment I've done the work and I'm finally open, I feel safe and I've opened my heart back up, I see so much proof because your brain always wants to prove you right, right? Like whatever you believe, your brain's going to give you evidence of it. So once I was like, okay, there are a lot of amazing men out there. Like there are so many guys out there that mean well, that want to operate in their divine masculine. I actually saw more of that. So I think you
Mm,
make a really good point. It's just whenever you get a bad experience, right? Learn from it, right? Be mindful of it, but closing your heart is not the answer.
agreed. Agreed. And yeah, I think what you said earlier, just to reiterate,
Yeah.
there's no right or wrong here. It's
Yeah.
not like saying if you're 60-40, 50-50, you're not masculine, you're not feminine. No, it's whatever authentically you are, knowing that and embodying it. And you'll know if you're out of balance.
Yeah.
You'll know you won't feel good.
You won't feel
And you'll
good.
see the reflection in everyone that you meet. So as men, as women, it is just our job to get back to our authentic self because authenticity is really it's everything in
Yeah.
life. If you're
Yeah.
not being yourself, doing what you love, you're living behind an image.
Correct. Yeah. I think the feeling part, because heard this so many times and you're gonna cringe. But as of late, I just feel I've been hearing a lot of women where they either go on a date, like a guy, whatever, and he's not like making next plans or whatever, right? I see a lot of women who really like the person and they want to make it work. They're the one reaching out, trying to plan dates. They're the one taking the lead. They're the one being like, well, when are you going to take me on a just cringy things that I feel like, again, to your point about feeling. If you are fearful that he's not going to ask you on the next date, it's probably your gut being like, he's not that into it. It's probably not a right fit, right? And then therefore acting on it is not going to get him to want you. I don't know the history of mankind of when telling a man what to do actually turns him on. You actually remind him of his mother, and that doesn't turn him on. So
Yes.
thoughts on that? I'm like, just I would say I share that story because it's just so recent and cringy. Things that people should be mindful of to embody their healthy like weight of masculine and feminine. What are some thoughts that people should be? What are some thoughts and some things that people should be doing to get back in the flow?
Well, I think the example that you just gave, like when I think of feminine energy, I think of like invitation,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's,
I love that.
women are like, should I approach that guy? If I see him, and I'm like, if you want to, sure. But if he is looking at you all night and he doesn't approach you, probably not in his masculine. And if you approach him, just know that that's how the relationship is going to start. And it's probably how it's going to maintain. Fine. If you're okay with that. But what I think what a woman does really well, it's so beautiful to watch, is that you're so subtle,
Yeah.
you're not as obvious as guys, we'll just stare, but a woman invites, she
Yeah.
invites, she's like, I see you, I'll give you a quick look, maybe
Yeah.
once, maybe twice, I'll stand next to you, you'll feel me,
Yeah.
but you got to make the
Yeah.
first move.
Mhm.
And if he doesn't, you got to ask yourself, is this the kind of man that you want to be with? Because like I said earlier, confidence is not, you're not just born with confidence,
Mhm.
right? You have, when you become successful as a man in life, whatever that means to the particular man, you gain confidence, you
Yeah.
earn authentic confidence. So now I think that's what a woman's attracted to, is the guy sees a woman, he goes after for what he wants, he might get rejected, but that's part of the game.
Mhm.
But I never seen a woman, in my experience, I've never gone up to a woman and she just abused me. She's always polite, because I think there's like this inherent respect.
Mm.
Like, here's a man who went up to this woman, beautiful woman, stranger, and had nothing in common, at least that he knew about, and he shot his shot.
Yeah.
That is masculine, right? But I do think that there's a dance. I do think a woman should allow the dance to happen, but she's usually initiating. And let's be honest, ultimately, she's choosing.
Yeah.
Men just have to be of choosing. We have to get ourselves to a level in our life where the woman that we want says, yeah, I'll let you take me on a date. I'll let you have sex with me. I'll let you put a ring on my finger. I'll let you be the father of my children.
Yeah.
That's why when people say men have all the power, I'm like, what are you talking about? I never saw it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, you have all the sexual currency,
Mhm.
which is pretty much how the world operates, and you choose. You're always choosing unless it's taken, which is the unfortunate small percentage of those incidences. But you're always in control of how the relationship is going to go, if it's going to continue, if it's going to end, more or less.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I feel like a lot of women, and what I'm seeing it's more based on scarcity mindset, right? Like there's an X, I'm just using New York, for example. There's an X amount of eligible bachelors in the city and they have their little clock going along. So a lot of women would just try to lock it down, right? But I think the most important thing is just being mindful. There are, I don't even, how many people in New York, just New York itself. You don't have to necessarily find someone in New York. I think it's just having a very abundant mindset and trusting. I always say this, like, trust that like you will get what you want and deserve if you show up the highest version of you or the things that you want in the other person you embody, right? It
Yes.
starts with you, right? If you genuinely working on yourself and you're always kind of going towards the highest version of you, you have to trust that you're going to attract someone who will be at your level, right? I think
Yes.
that a lot of women just don't trust. that it's going to come. It's like, I only achieve these things in my work life because I went after it. Love does not work that way. To back to Robert's point about polarity, right? We are the one who eventually say yes or no and we choose, but like you have to let the guy be a guy. Otherwise you set a very, to your point, a different pace in the relationship. But no, I think we kind of touched on it, but what are some things people should do or keep in mind to constantly, work on that healthy balance within themselves?
Yeah, I think, really the theme of this conversation is alignment,
Yeah.
right? It's inner alignment, which is going to lead to outer alignment,
Yeah.
and just a quick sidebar. I had a client over recently, a woman, and she goes, since I started walking this path, like she started being celibate and like going into her spirituality,
Yeah.
she goes, men don't approach me anymore. And I talked to my therapist, and my therapist thinks I gotta change this and change that. And I'm like, be very careful what you listen to. It's not that at all.
Yeah.
What it is you're coming into alignment with your true self. So now all the men that they used to attract, maybe for superficial reasons, they don't see you anymore.
Exactly.
You elevated above them. So now it's going to be less. It's not going to be, all this noise coming at you, because you're not misaligned. You're not leading with your sexuality. You're leading with your truth. So now the man that does see you is going to recognize your soul.
Yes.
And that's how it works. It's not supposed to be every Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Yeah.
The person that's meant for us is already chosen. We just have to be in alignment
Yeah.
with that, right? So I think that's really important. So to answer your question, just check in with yourself.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to drop into your feminine, what is it that makes you feel more feminine? Like I see women dancing that lose themselves in dance, and I'm like, I don't see a lot of guys doing that.
Yeah.
But right, like guys are always kind of like we do a little two step, but women they lose themselves. It's like wild, and I think it's one of the most feminine things I've ever seen. It's like this primal, wild energy, and just dropping into that. And volunteer work. I see a lot of women at volunteer work working with children, and I'm like, well, it's so beautiful to see a woman around children. Because you ever see like little girls with carriages with their dolls in their carriages?
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
it's like I'm like, this is the most beautiful. You'll never see a boy doing that. But
right.
little girls are seeded with this nurturing in them.
Yeah.
It's there. It's part of who they are. It's this mother instinct. So being around animals and children to awaken that nurturing energy, I think is important. But whatever it is, maybe creativity or art, just to feel put a dress on. I don't know if that makes you feel feminine, do yoga, whatever it is for you specifically to drop into that. And it's the same thing for men. I used to box a lot.
Yeah.
There was something primal about that,
Yeah.
that getting out that anger and hitting something or someone.
Yeah.
It brought me alive. It brought out a difference. It didn't bring a different side of me. It brought out that side of me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You made a really good point. I feel like it's just doing the things that make you feel good. Like whatever it is, right? I would say doing the activities that make you feel good. And then when you're alone in stillness, if you meditate, journal, whatever, kind of journal or think through like, why did those things make you feel good? I think that will remind you more of like your essence and bring you back to it. Like you mentioned dancing. I totally forgot I used to like love dancing when I was a little girl. Like I would freestyle and doing whatever crazy thing I was doing. And my family would say, "Oh, teach your sister, teach Adora." And I would say like, "I don't know how to teach her. Like I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just freestyling." I never followed instructions. I was just like do my own thing. But I think over time as I got older, I was like, okay, stop doing things that are not practical. That's not going to help my career. That's not going to progress me forward. So I just stopped dancing. And then maybe like a couple weeks ago, I just took a class where I was called to do it. And I forgot how much I loved it. I was so embarrassed at first because like everyone's like, I mean, skilled. I'm just barely keeping up. And this wonderful, sweet woman tapped me. She was like, I was so intimidated by her. She was right next to me. She was crushing it, right? She tapped me and goes, "You're a really good dancer. You need to let loose." She was like, "You are just holding back." It's like, dang. And it was like a moment where I'm like, it's just embody, own it. I think the biggest thing I tell myself and women that I coach, you need to own it. the root of it was I was fearful of my femininity. I shut off my sexuality. I shut off my sensuality because I'm like, I want to be more masculine, right? I wanted to be more getting, achieving, whatever. That I'm like, wait, actually, I need to turn all those things back on because it made me feel so good. And to your point on creativity, I got so many creative downloads while I was dancing. Then while I was going to bed and my dreams, I had very creative ideas and things I would apply, not just to my life, but also to work. So I would say, do the things that make you feel good. You mentioned boxing. I love boxing. Like, like it literally makes me come alive. And I actually feel very feminine when I box because I feel like I'm owning my body. Right. So again, it could be seemingly a masculine thing to do, but whatever makes you feel good, go for it. Right. And then definitely
Yeah,
check in with
yeah,
yourself to say like, how do I feel?
I love it. And that last thing is
I
really
know about
important, just real quick.
yeah,
Check in on your thoughts and your beliefs.
yeah,
How do you
yes,
feel about men? How do you feel about women? Check in, because I would say that there could be a dangerous limiting belief that you have that's creating a wall.
yeah. I feel like there is a quote that I always resonates with me. You'll find something like you'll find love not when you open your heart, but when you take off all the barriers of walls that are protecting your heart.
Yeah,
Like to what Robert just said, what are the things that you are protecting yourself from or things you're still holding on from in your past that's causing you to think certain things about people without even getting to know them, like preconceived notions of them, stereotypes. I think it's a really good point. But Robert, as we wrap up, is there anything else that you feel like we should cover? Anything else, because we're just really freestyling, anything else that you think we should touch upon about the subject?
nothing comes to mind. I just think it's really important to note that there is no right or wrong way, right? There's, especially in today's modern society, there's all different. Masculinity is a spectrum to some degree, and I think so is femininity.
Yeah.
And there's no right way to operate. But what is important is to know what your natural state is and what
Mhm.
feels good and operate from that. And if it's authentic, then you're just going to attract that counterpart that fits perfectly into your own energy.
Yeah. And back to why all this stuff matters. On the other side of what you want, like in order to get what you want, truly what you want, you need to figure out this balance because more likely than not, this off balance is the reason why you're not getting the love life you want, the career you want, the adventures you, whatever it may be. And so it's not a woo woo concept, people who are new to it, it's just all energy. And don't forget, we're all made out of atoms, which is just balls of energy. So this is not some woo woo thing, it is just physics. We're just explaining it in a way that's applicable to your life. So